Open and we're ready to go.
Okay, thanks. Oh, it looks like recording just started according to the prompt I got. Good morning, everybody. We will convene the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. The first item we have up here, and I think we'll be joined by our Education Enforcement Director, Chandra Brady, in a second, I'm sure, but we're going to start with Matt McCollum, the Education Program Manager from Education and Enforcement, to give us an Enforcement Education Program update. Good morning, Matt. Thanks for joining us. And if you want to go ahead and get started, I assume Chandra will join us momentarily.
Yeah, and she said too, just her and I had talked before this, so I'll be doing the talking on the education program stuff. And a big part of this is really the inception of the enforcement education program out of a need identified by stakeholders, a need identified by enforcement staff over a long course of time, and really the desire for our staff to be the best public servants they can. And that was something that they identified specifically. And there were some pillars that came out of that that really our consultant staff had sort of reiterated sort of what we already knew, but didn't have the exact or as detailed of a need identified. And basically what I'm talking about here is, through auditing the materials that we had, how we're delivering them, the preparedness of our field staff to discuss topics when they first come out or years down the road, our ability to be consistent and our ability to have detailed discussions with licensees on difficult topics was an area that our staff felt strongly that we had room to grow in and that we wanted to grow in. And that's something too that they're excited about, having the opportunity to work with stakeholders to create content that stakeholders need. And when I say stakeholders, I'm not just talking about licensees, but it's, organizational groups having an outlet and a pathway to be able to get education material that they need. And when I say education material, I'm not talking about diving into, well, what is the answer to this contentious, question? How is this rule? We don't agree with this rule. It's really about what is a specific rule, or what is a specific topic? What is the LCB expecting? And our field staff being able to clearly articulate that with licensees and be prepared to talk about it when they need to. And some examples of that, as I've started to go through building this program, and it is in its infancy, we have the foundation sort of laid, but as I move forward, you'll kind of see what I mean. It was really reaching out to the other divisions within our agency and letting them know sort of what our enforcement staff and what licensees are telling our staff, and sort of being able to bridge the gaps there, because there's a lot of good information that comes out from other divisions, but the execution of our enforcement staff and their ability to talk about it comes from a different perspective at times than, say, licensing or rules. And it's not that the information's different, it's just the type of information that's needed in the field is going to be a little bit different, or have a little bit different approach to it in terms of messaging, or what the follow-up questions are, and our staff's ability to be prepared for those and be able to be as professional and prepared as possible. And that goes beyond being able just to talk about it. It's having resources. It's being proactive about our education. One of the big things that came out of this was we need to do a better job of measuring our education once we have something built. So that's something that, our director has stressed, and our field staff are working hard to explore is, okay, we have this new education tool. Is it successful? And what does success look like for this education tool? And being purposeful so that we're not just kicking something out and, we're done with it, whether or not it works. And I have some examples of how we, try to avoid that preemptively, and then how we go back and revisit it after we provide that education. So that's sort of the basis for the need of this enforcement education division, or this program within the enforcement division. It's really a need for resources for staff, resources for stakeholders, and an emphasis on partnering with groups. So even partnering with other law enforcement agencies. People would be shocked to find out how little they know about the education that we can provide them, that we can provide their communities, and how we interact and where that crossing occurs in terms of education. So that's really a big part. Just as an overview, I've spoke about this for well over an hour with other groups. I know I only have 10 minutes, so reach out to me on any of those details. I got detailed workflows for how we create education and everything. We pilot our education with licensees when possible, and get their feedback before rolling it out. And a really great example of that is a canopy measurement. We put out a new procedure for canopy measurement and enforcement, and that project, we worked with our subject matter experts on it. We pilot it with licensees who know what that looks like for the industry. We ask them, again, as sort of we're not asking you to tell us whether you agree or disagree with the law or the rule. We want to know that you understand what we're telling you and how can we do a better job of explaining this to you. So we take those piloted interactions, we come back, we tweak it, we train our staff how to educate on the topic before we roll it out to the general public. And then they're prepared once they roll it out to then have those discussions. And another example, I've been working a lot, and Kathy and Justin and their team have been awesome. Having this shift where, okay, we have these new rules, like the QC rule changes that came out. That was a big one where I worked with Justin, and I went to him and said, man, we really need to have our staff, and when I say our staff, I mean enforcement staff, prepared to discuss this at the point of contact face-to-face with licensees when that rule comes out, so that we're not just handing them a version of the email that goes out from communications. And they did a great job of, Justin and I work close, and as it's coming to you, like, hey, this is what the language is going to look like. Prepare your staff, but let's coordinate the timeline. And that way we had a guide prepared for our staff to hand out to licensees. And I just got out of a meeting checking with our consultants, reviewing that material to make sure it's effective, making sure we don't need to continue to make tweaks to it, that we're not washing our hands and, okay, it's done, we don't have to do anything else. So that's sort of an example of what we're building toward with all of our education and enforcement. As we're doing this, and as we've rolled it out, and as I've really been working with as many groups, as we possibly can, we're giving like retailer safety training statewide. We've been averaging about 20 different participants per training in those events. Again, providing education to licensees on the LCB's perspective of how they can be safe within, and a big part of it too is it describing to them how our rules are designed to keep them safe. They're not designed to be, difficult for them and things like that. And what I'd like to show with you, I'm going to share my screen here real quick.
You're muted, Matt. It just came on when you started sharing your screen.
Yeah, I had to tell my son to please be quiet. Sorry. He's singing Korean songs in the other room. I don't know if you can see this screen here, and forgive me, I'm not going to put it on slideshow mode because it dominates my entire surface here. You can start to see on this graph completed projects which are low, and that's just at this point as we're getting off the ground. I'm the only education resource we have, but you can see the pending education projects that are just sitting with the enforcement program, and the in-process projects that we have, as well as completed. And some of those completed projects are, we have a settlement conference dashboard now on our public-facing website. This really highlights all of the work that our adjudications coordinator does. Sorry, had to tell my son to stop singing. It basically highlights for the entire month in detail what meetings that they've had in terms of settlement conferences, and then gives a running total for the annual year of all of the work that his team is doing. Again, one of the big things about our education is we've always done a lot of work, but we haven't always done a fantastic job of talking with licensees and highlighting to them everything that we're doing for them and with them. And there's some really easy things that we can do to be more transparent with licensees about that. And this was one of the things that, my director had identified and said, hey, we need to do a better job of highlighting that. And then we're able to do that and put that out. And that's something that everyone has access to. Canopy measurement protocol, I talked about that a little bit. In addition to the safety training for retailers, we have a safety handout on cannabis material that our field staff can hand out and physically interact with, or send in a PDF form to begin to have those productive discussions with licensees and build that rapport and let them know that, we are concerned about this, and here's some things that we've identified that you can do. The QC guide I talked about a little bit. We now have an enforcement education page on the website. Brian in communications and his team help us put together, so that we're going to start really working for our field staff to have a one-stop shop, provide our licensees, here is the updated, vetted material that we are putting out on topics that you are concerned about. Here's where it's going to live. So we're not sending them kind of all over the place for things, and our staff can point them right to that in relation to enforcement education material. And then they have a mirrored version on our intranet where they can go get that stuff. I will say also that as we train our staff how to educate, which is a big thing that we identified, don't just have education material, train your staff how to use it. We create, video training on how to use the specific materials that we put out when appropriate. So we've been doing that. And then just a taste of this, obviously isn't the full list. You kind of saw back here, we have, lots of them. As only one person at the moment, I can't dip into every project that we have, but and I have to sort of prioritize them based off of need, but I did want to kind of highlight some of the upcoming or ongoing projects just to give you a taste. Cannabis robbery safety education, again, that's every single week with the exception of the July 4th week. Every single week. I think the first one was in May, and it's going through the end of July. So, and that's regional, but we also have opportunities for it's open to anyone. We have an idea submission project internal that we've been working on for our field staff to make improvements in their work. An axe throwing guide. We're getting prepared for that. This is another example of us preparing for things that may be coming so that our staff is prepared to talk about it. And it's giving them the history on why this is there, giving them what it looks like in other states, and then preparing them for issues that might come up when that comes up. Alcohol delivery, we've been looking at other states and what they're doing and seeing how we can partner with them to use some of their resources. Texas has a bunch of videos on alcohol delivery that are really similar to our rules. And so I've been talking with them to see how we might be able to collaborate with some of that content. We're also partnering with other state agencies. I'm going to be giving a safety presentation to LNI as they start to go out to our licensees, things that are safety related for their staff to look for that may not be what they're used to seeing in a cannabis grow or a processing facility, extractor safety concerns, things like that, what to look for. We're working on a money's worth informational sheet. This was a request from a liquor group. I can't remember if it was like the Brewers Guild or one, but it was one of the groups that represents multiple licensees asking us for that content. Annual filing for distillers, educating our own staff, and then talking about how to educate people in the field. And then we're working on FDA team web education content. We have a FDA team, and it's not always clear how that relationship works with the LCB, but providing the data and information that they collect externally. So this is just sort of an example of some of the stuff we're doing. But again, it's not everything. Kind of back to this slide. We have a lot going on, and we're growing quick. And the amount of education material that the industry has identified, the feedback they've been giving us about how they're excited to work with us has been off the chart. There's a lot of forward momentum on this, and we really hope to be able to put out material that's useful for our staff and for licensees and general stakeholders in the general public. And I would just throw out sort of as a last little piece here, the education program is an open door to everyone to reach out to learn more about, to suggest education material that's needed, to find out what we're working on. The transparency on it is meant to be exponential as we move forward and be very open to everyone about what we're doing and how we're serving the public. So with that, if anybody has any questions or anything, or again, there's a lot of detail in the program itself that I don't have time to share, but welcome to reach out and ask about whatever. So, and I don't know, Chandra, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment. Most of you guys know this was part of our goals, is to do a better job communicating with our staff about changes that were coming and making sure that we were tailoring information specifically to employees or specifically to licensees so that everybody knows what's going on. So I'm really excited about this. Matt has done a great job building out our program and getting it off the ground. And it's one of our major strategic goals for the next 2 years. So it's really exciting to see it happening and happening so well. And so thank you, Matt, for doing that and for sharing that with us.
Yeah, Matt, first of all, this is great. I'm really glad to learn more about what has been going on here. I'll reach out. I'd like to get a little more time to go through some of the more specifics with you. It's interesting. Director Brady and I were just talking yesterday about the quality control piece and what we want to do. So I'll be interested to learn more about that and what else we could do. I don't take a lot of time. One quick question for you, at least I think it's a quick question. When you started, you said that you had to figure out first how to measure success in these things. Are you confident today that we have that ongoing? So a year from now, if you're back before us, you can say, well, here's how we'd measure the last 12 months for success.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're referring to. Project specific, yes.
Okay.
We have a lot. One of the issues we identified through our audit is we have a lot of education content over the last 20, 30 years that we have to go back through and update and make sure that we're using, we're providing those resources as needed. And so there's sort of a rollout to that in terms of specific education material. But yeah, we're working on, and those slides were kind of a taste of it. We're working on putting together measuring the success of the program, like are we putting out content and why are we putting that out, as well as the success of the content itself. And then it's an ever evolving thing where we need to look at, well, what sort of measurables aren't we looking at? What might be useful? For example, I talked with traffic safety the other day, and they have some data, and we're like, well, how can we incorporate some of that data into maybe looking at the success of this specific education piece? And it's really an ongoing thing. And I was a teacher for years. I come from a nonprofit educational background, working at the University of Washington in museums and things, and programs and this sort of stuff is sort of what I've always been interested in. And I'm excited to explore every one of those options. And something I really built to our staff and stakeholders is the beauty of education is we can swing and miss on stuff. I really want to promote trying and going, let's try to measure something. What we want to get away from is the measurement of we provided the education this many times success. That's not. It's good to measure that, but that isn't necessarily a measurement of success. So we want to start to explore what that looks like. Because we haven't done that in enforcement, there is going to be sort of trial and error a little bit of how we measure success. And a lot of it's project-based. So I hope that kind of answers it. We're looking at all of it, though, and trying to be dynamic with it. And being dynamic is actually a slide on my long presentation. How can we be more dynamic about our education?
Yeah. And also we do have success measures identified in our strategic plan overall for the education that we do provide.
Yeah, cool. Any other questions for Matt this morning from board members?
No, I do have a comment, though, and your background as an educator came through loud and clear, so I really appreciated hearing that, Matt. I really like what you said about, it's one thing to have education material. It's another thing to train staff in how to use that education material successfully. So like David, I will probably follow up with you. I would love to have the full version of this conversation at some point and get more of the background and would love to do that. So I'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, and I would throw out too, I'm happy to, as we have something coming up, you're more than welcome to ride along with us through the process of one of the projects. So you can sit through the training that our staff get on the material that goes out, and then you'll see the notification to licensees and stakeholders on that material, and you'll have that kind of link to see, okay, maybe it'll make a little sense of, okay, this is how we're training our staff to use it. And it's really about being specific of, this is when we want you to deliver it. This is the message we need to be consistent with. Here's your material, and then we'll revisit, you know, well, what sort of questions came up when you gave this out? What do we need to tweak? And
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Great. Okay. All right. Thanks again, Matt. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Chandra. Good work all around, and it sounds like we'll have some follow-up. So talk to you soon on that.
thank you.
Thank you. Apologize to your son for, you know, having to shush him on our behalf, but you
He
know,
sings Korean music all day long, so it's
that's good. Got to encourage those things. So
yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Here is Dr. Kathy Hoffman, who's going to take us through a board meeting prep and rules update. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Postman and board members Garrett and Boltendroff.
Good morning.
I'll provide you with a monthly rule update and then hand it over to Audrey and Jeff to prepare you for the 2 agenda items that are on the board meeting agenda for tomorrow. So starting with rules in progress, with respect to implementation of Senate Bill 5940 or the contract packaging services endorsement, work continues to progress towards draft conceptual rule completion. The formal comment period on the CR 101 concludes next week, so that's June 17th, and to date, no comments have been received on that project. We do anticipate sharing draft conceptual rules through GovDelivery in the coming weeks for public comment rather than hosting a listen and learn session on this project, since the provision of this endorsement was legislatively mandated. So there just doesn't seem to be a need at this point for this project to host listen and learn. So under this timeline, we anticipate bringing a 102 proposal to you for review on July 20th. That would set the public hearing for August 3rd, and then final rules would be ready for your review and potential adoption no earlier than September 14th. So with respect to axe throwing at liquor license premises, Audrey will speak to you in just a few moments about the 103 that she'll be presenting at the board meeting tomorrow. And happy to see that Matt was coordinating some enforcement education there as well. So great to see that coordination happening in the agency. So moving on to general rulemaking, we brought the 102 proposal for electronic transmission of documents for service and filing at the May 11th board meeting. And again, to date on that project, no formal comments have been received. So we remain prepared to host the public hearing on June 22nd. And under that timeline, we can bring rules to you for adoption or a CR 103 as soon as July 6th. So that project is quickly approaching conclusion. So moving on to cannabis, the THC definition project continues to progress with internal rule development meetings scheduled largely this month in June. We received 1 comment on the CR 101 that we filed so far, and that comment period ends on July 1st. So there still could be more, but there just hasn't been a huge influx of comments for this particular project just yet. We do anticipate hosting a listen and learn session on draft conceptual rules on July 14th. And under that timeline, we could bring the 102 to you for review and approval on September 14th. And that it could be earlier, it could be a little later. It really does depend on the outcome of the listen and learn session and what kind of work we need to do there in terms of amendments to, I think it's 314.55, 560, yes. So under that timeline, if we did bring the 102 to you on September 14th, public hearing would be held on October 26th with final rules for review and potential adoption on November 23rd. So before the legislative session starts, but very close to the commencement of the 2023 session. And as you know, we held our 4th deliberative dialogue last week on May 31st, where we heard law enforcement perspectives around what empowering meant from our state patrol partners. We also were joined by an emeritus professor from WSU, Nick Lovrich, and then the creator of the Druid app, Michael Milburn. And that's an app that measures neurophysiological indicators like reaction time and hand-eye coordination, and is used to judge impairment. And you can download the app and practice using it. It's kind of an interesting app. I tried it. We do plan on hosting our final deliberative dialogue on the afternoon of June 21st and bringing our behavioral health partners together. And so far we have Dr. Bia Carlini, from UW joining us. Still working on recruiting a few other panelists, and at this point we're reaching out to King County Public Health and a few other resources. So Mary Segal and I are, and thank you, Board Member Vollendroff, for your assistance on recruitment as well. So details will be coming via Gov Delivery on that final panel for that work this week. So with respect to implementation of Second Substitutes House Bill 1210, that's on target for final adoption on July 6th. And as you know, that's the project that changes the word marijuana to cannabis throughout all of LCB's rules. Public comment period for that ends on July 2nd. And again, this is an expedited process, so no public hearing. So far, 2 non-substantive comments have been received. And Jeff is working with our communications director and internal policy manager to coordinate that word change throughout our agency. So on our website, on documents that we use internally, so on and so forth. So there's a lot to be changed, and we're working to coordinate those efforts. And then with respect to the social equity rules, we do continue our additional research and analysis. We have received some additional comments since we withdrew the 102 package, largely asking the agency to achieve things through rule that would require a statutory or a legislative revision. So, for instance, asking us to make licenses mobile throughout the state rather than what the statute says right now with respect to county mobility, and then also asking if through rule we could include producer processor licenses in the social equity program. And at this point, that would need to be a statutory change. It's restricted at this point by statute only to retail licensees or licenses, excuse me. And then with respect to pesticide action levels, I think after Audrey, Jeff will give you a quick briefing on what he'll be offering to you in the board meeting tomorrow with respect to the CR 103 for that project. 2 more things just briefly. We did receive a petition for rulemaking on May 24th asking us to convert the temporary allowance of curbside cannabis delivery to rule. That would take a statutory revision, but we will respond to the petitioner and plan on bringing our response and recommendations to you on July 19th. And then finally, 2 things to offer with respect to what's on the horizon. I previously mentioned that we would be starting work on cannabis packaging and labeling and advertising rules, and we had hoped to start that work this month. I think it's looking more like August at this point, given the complexity of these projects, particularly the complexity of the authorizing environment. A lot of folks we need to touch base with before we commence that work. So a lot of work to do there before we ever get to the 101s on those. I don't want to make it sound like it's not going to happen. It is going to happen this year, but we need to do some more internal discussion and external outreach before we begin that work to significantly move them forward. And then we still plan on hosting our World Cafe sessions with respect to discussion around federal legalization based on what's happening now with some of the conferences we need to attend and other stakeholder engagement. We plan on starting that work in late July. And really, it's looking like the last week of July at this point. So I'll stop there. Any questions I can answer before I hand it over to Audrey?
None for me. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
My only
So
question was how do I unmute, but I think I figured it out, so I got it. But no, I'm good. Thank you.
a very popular question for sure.
Yes.
So, Audrey, go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning, Chair Postman, board members Garrett and Vollendroff. So tomorrow I will be requesting board adoption of the final rules related to axe throwing at liquor license premises. And I won't get into the whole background today, but I'll just do a brief background. So rules are needed to provide a framework to address the public health and safety concerns that arise when alcohol service is combined with axe throwing, as well as provide consistency for businesses that seek approval to offer this activity at their liquor license premises. So the final rules in CR 103 package before you were developed through a collaborative rule development process involving both internal and external stakeholders and including input from public health and prevention, axe throwing businesses, other liquor licensees, and just interested members of the public in general. The rule development and stakeholder engagement process included a listen and learn session on February 3rd, 2022, that around 65 individuals attended. During the public comment period, which began on March 16th and ran until April 27th, 4 public comments and questions were received, all in support of the proposal, and we received several additional comments and questions in support after that formal public comment period closed. All of those comments are included in the concise explanatory statement. So in summary, the final rules would require licensees that offer axe throwing to create a safety operating plan that includes 2 main components. So the first component is protocols for monitoring patron intoxication and consumption of alcohol. And the second component is a floor plan designating consumption areas where alcohol is allowed and identifying axe throwing areas where alcohol is not allowed. The final rules would require axe throwing areas to have barriers to keep them separate from the designated consumption areas and to prevent axes from traveling outside of those consumption areas. The rules also outline how to request a change in a safety operating plan and include a reference to penalties for noncompliance. And there were no changes from the proposed rules to the final rules that are in the CR 103 package. In terms of timeline, if the board adopts the final rules tomorrow, the rules would go into effect 31 days later on July 9th. I'm happy to answer any questions.
None from me today.
I
Thanks.
have none.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Postman and members Garrett and Vollendroff. At tomorrow's meeting, I will present for your approval the CR 103 package to permanently amend the WAC rule section regarding pesticide action levels in cannabis, and that section is WAC 314-55-108. These amendments specifically update technical information for some of the pesticides that are approved for use with cannabis. The other amendments in this section, as they were planned in advance, update this rule section for consistency with the quality control testing rules that went into effect on April 2nd, 2022, and also remove some redundant rule language from this section. The rule text for this rulemaking has been updated since the CR 102 with the changes to replace the term marijuana with the term cannabis, consistent with second substitute House Bill 1210, but no other changes to the rule section have been made. We did receive 4 comments on the proposed rule, but those were outside the scope of the rulemaking. So that concludes my update about the CR 103, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you.
We're
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. And is that it? I guess that is it for rules update and board prep. So thank you for that. And that Takes us to our last agenda item, board member reports. Anything to report, Member Vollendorf or Garrett?
I have nothing to report.
Okay,
Nope, I have nothing to report today.
great. Thank you both, and either do I. So we will adjourn. We have a board meeting tomorrow, so we look forward to seeing you all and many more there for that tomorrow. And with that, we will adjourn the caucus meeting for June 7th, 2022. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.